In today's Elden Ring video, we're gonna take a look at 5 more incredible weapons that will absolutely destroy enemies. We have weapons on today's list that can deal both frost and lightning damage, hammers that stagger everything, and a few more that will simply obliterate anything in your sight with a lot of style, so let's begin. Now coming up to number 1, let's talk about a quite early dragon's Halberd. You acquired this from the Dragonkin soldier near the waterfall in the Siofra River. So from the ancestral wood side of Grace, simply follow the aqueduct on a downwards pattern until you reach kinda like this larger lake with the boss in the middle of it. Once you defeat it, it's going to drop the Halberd, and its requirements are 22 into strength and 10 into dexterity. At plus 10, it gets a B scaling into strength, so that's going to be the stat that you will want the most with this one. But what makes it so incredible is its weapon special. It comes with a special variant of the spinning slash, so on top of the fact that you can spin attack with this, you're also going to enchant your weapon with additional lightning damage and frost build-up. The buff also lasts for a very long 20 seconds, given the fact that this is a super easy one to apply, and of course you also deal a ton of damage with the spin attacks. As a matter of fact, you can chain these spin attacks to pretty much almost like interrupt and stagger any enemy in the game, especially ones that tend to have shields. Its final blow with a downward strike is also very powerful, and this is the one that's likely going to also finally cause the frost build-up. It literally takes no more than a couple of hits after the initial application to create some of that frost build-up, which also deals damage on its own. You can also of course follow up with some of the spoke attacks with the R1. It's overall amazing at roll catching, but even in like PvE scenarios, it's an amazing weapon to have since it drops quite early in the game. But moving on to number 2, let's talk about the all-amazing Troll's Hammer. You actually can use this weapon to chain, stun lock most of the enemies in the game, and like provide extreme stagger against most of the bosses in the game. Now you get this from the old Atlas Tunnel. You will need about 2 stoneward keys to open this up, but once you do that, you can go into this first big room, jump down, and you should find the Troll's Hammer upon this corpse inside one of these shacks. Now what makes this weapon special? Actually, there's a few things that makes this weapon very special, on top of the fact that it's a very heavy weapon. One of them is the fact that you can deal both physical and fire damage with it all at the same time, which means yes, faith builds that dip in with strength can totally make use of it. Second of all, it comes with a special skill called Troll's Roar, which pretty much generates a powerful shockwave that will blow back any enemy on its butt, deals very high damage, and against bosses it means no more than a couple of shots to stagger them or stun them. What makes it truly special though is its ability to still hold enchants and armaments despite the fact that it already has an Ash of War. So yes, you can totally still use the Ash of War while still having it enchanted with something like a Blood Flame or maybe like Electrify armaments. Pretty much anything in the game, including Greases, definitely works on it. You can even further buff its damage with Flame Grant Me Strength, maybe even a Golden Vow, to easily surpass 1000 AR. Now it does have some downsides. Most important, it's a slow weapon, which I guess makes up for the fact that it's amazing at dealing damage and staggering, which is why I recommend initiating combat with a jump heavy, immediately followed by a Troll's Roar and then another heavy, which usually stuns enemies right away, so you can follow up with a critical strike. Now moving on to number 3, let's talk about another weapon that can deal both lightning and frost damage, and this time around it's going to be a katana called the Dragonscale Blade. This is dropped by a similar Dragonkin soldier mini boss that you now find in the Lake of Rot right here in the middle, so you will want to make your way over there. I definitely recommend activating the platforms nearby using all of these, well, pressure points, and once you do that, you're going to be able to more easily take down the boss. Also, you can use Flame Cleanse Me to remove the rot in case it builds up too much. Now once you defeat him, it's going to give you that blade. It requires about 12 points into strength and about 20 in dexterity, which means a samurai can go ahead and equip it quite easily. At plus 10, its dexterity scaling changes from C to B, so you're going to want to stack as much dex as possible. But the weapon attack on it is what makes it so cool. It's quite similar to the previous one. You're going to be able to cast down a ice lightning attack when you do that downward thrust, which doesn't just deal damage to the enemy but also imbues your weapon with, well, electricity and frost. frost. So you can create both some additional damage with it, but also do that frost build up on enemies, which oftentimes results in additional damage. Now this might not be the strongest katana in the game, but it definitely has its uses. You can cast that extra lightning strike in front of you to also provide some additional interrupts against the enemies. You can of course also follow up with a few quick slashes of the katana, which builds up frost way easier than the previous talked about Halberd. But this brings us to number 4 and to another amazing greatsword called the Ruins Greatsword that you get from a duo boss encounter in the plaza of the Red Mains Castle. You do need to defeat Radahn first, and after a while this encounter will spawn, but it's totally worth it because this is one of the coolest and best weapons right now in Elden Ring. This requires quite a hefty 50 points into strength and just 16 into intelligence, which means it's more aimed towards, well, kinda hybrids but not really. At max rank 10 it gets a nice scaling into strength, so those are the majority of the points you're going to want to invest into. But what makes this so amazing, outside of the fact that its heavy attacks are super devastating, is also that wave of destruction unique skill that already comes on it. If you played with the Blasphemous Blade, it's kinda similar to that, with the exception of the fact that instead of casting fire, you kinda cast this magic sort of gravity that deals high damage in a very long line. Even if you don't invest many points into intelligence, this is still a very good ability to use, especially if you're trapped in a tunnel or if there's a lot of enemies in front of you. You can just damage them all, if not even completely annihilate them all, at the same time with a devastating spell on it. Since it's a colossal weapon, it takes no more than a couple of shots, especially with the jump heavy attacks, to stun an enemy and follow up with a heavy critical. But even like its wave of destruction for some reason can also stagger enemies. It's a little bit more unreliable, but totally worth it because you can do it from pretty far away. Moving on to number 5 and the final one, this brings us to another weapon similar to Malekith's sword and the Black Blade incantation we checked in previous videos, but this is the Black Knife. It's dropped by the Black Knife enemy that you can find in front of the Sainted Hero's grave right here around the center of the Altus Plateau. Now at first this might not look like much, it only gets a B scaling into dexterity, but it's again one of those weapons that casts a wave of death that doesn't just deal damage, it lasts over time, but also reduces enemies' HP. And we've seen how strong enemy HP reduction spells are in the previous videos. They are totally worth it, even though you might not see like huge damage numbers. The higher the enemy's HP is, the better a weapon like this will be, because essentially you reduce a percentage based of their total HP, and it also continues with this weapon to happen over time, way better than some of the previous options like Malekith's sword or the Black Blade incantation. As a matter of fact, just from my testing and from a quick look, it seems that the burn effect lasts for a much longer time compared to the previous two options. Usually this means you're going to want to start a fight with this weapon, since at the beginning of the fight is when you're going to reduce the highest amount of the enemy's HP, and then maybe switch to another heavy hitter that doesn't rely on that mechanic, maybe like a Blasphemous Blade or something that deals a ton of damage, and you're gonna be able to take down a lot more of the enemy's HP bar than if you were to do otherwise. It also comes with a sort of like jump animation, which is totally capable of avoiding incoming projectiles, and it seems to be quite good against some of those Godskin Apostle enemies and bosses, which are quite annoying with their black flame attacks, but obviously it can work with other types of range attacks from enemies too. This is it though with the weapons. Let me know down below which ones are your favorite, or if there's any other weapons that I have not covered in the past that you might want to see in one of these future videos. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.